They called her the Invisible One. For 21 years, Seren Vale existed in the cracks of the Iron Vale pack, washing bloodstains from the training yard stones, mending clothes that were thrown at her face, eating scraps cold from plates that the dogs had already licked clean. She was an Omega without a wolf, a ghost with a heartbeat. The kind of girl that pack members looked through, not at. For 3 consecutive moon cycles, Alpha Kalen Vex had summoned the most beautiful, most powerful females in the territory to compete for the position of his Luna. One by one, they entered his trial. One by one, they failed. 14 candidates had walked into that ancient stone arena. 14 had limped out broken, disqualified, and humiliated. But none of them knew what Seren knew. None of them carried the ember burning beneath her ribs, the whisper of flames that had haunted her dreams since childhood. They saw a mute servant girl with dirt beneath her fingernails. They didn't see the inferno waiting to be unleashed. When Seren finally steps into that arena, she won't just pass the trial. She will rewrite the laws of the Iron Vale pack in ash and fire, and every wolf who ever spat on her name will kneel. The servants' quarters of the Iron Vale pack house smelled of mildew, lye soap, and quiet desperation. Seren's room, if it could be called that, was a converted storage closet beneath the eastern stairwell. The ceiling sloped so low she couldn't stand fully upright. Her bed was a straw mattress on the floor, her blanket a threadbare wool rag that had been discarded from the stables. She woke before dawn, as always. The cold stone bit into her bare feet as she dressed in her gray servant's uniform, shapeless, colorless, designed to make her forgettable. Today was the 15th day of the Luna trials. Seren crept through the servants' corridor toward the kitchen, keeping her eyes down. The pack house was already stirring with excitement. She could hear the chatter of maids arranging flowers, the clatter of silver being polished for the evening feast. Another candidate today, one of the kitchen workers whispered as Seren passed. Delara Ashworth, Beta Gregor's daughter. They say she's the one. About time, another replied. Alpha Kalen's been tearing through these girls like a wolf through sheep. Maybe Delara can finally satisfy whatever impossible standard he set. Seren said nothing. She never did. She collected her bucket and brush from the supply room and made her way toward the great hall, where the morning's mess awaited. Last night had been a feast celebrating the 14th candidate's attempt and subsequent failure. Wine stains bloomed across the stone floor like dried blood. Half-eaten meat congealed on forgotten plates. Seren knelt and began to scrub. The work was mindless, which was both a curse and a blessing. It allowed her thoughts to wander to dangerous places, places where she imagined what it might feel like to walk through the front doors instead of the servants' entrance, to wear silk instead of sackcloth, to have someone, anyone, look at her with something other than disgust. Well, well, the floor rat is awake. The voice sliced through Seren's thoughts like a blade. She didn't need to look up to recognize it. Delara Ashworth descended the grand staircase in a cascade of auburn curls and emerald silk. She was stunning, the kind of beauty that made other women feel inadequate, and men lose their ability to form sentences. Her father, Beta Gregor, controlled the pack's warriors. Her mother had been a Luna candidate herself, decades ago. Delara was born for the position Seren could never dream of occupying. I asked the staff to have this hall spotless by sunrise. Delara stopped at the edge of the stain Seren was scrubbing, her heeled boot inches from Seren's fingers. And yet here you are, still working. Do you do anything with competence? I'm almost finished, Miss Ashworth. Seren kept her voice flat, emotionless. It's future Luna Ashworth, Delara corrected, a cruel smile curving her lips. After today's trial, you'll address me as your superior. Oh, wait. She laughed. You already are beneath me, aren't you? In every possible way. Two of Delara's companions giggled from behind her. Seren recognized them as daughters of high-ranking pack members, girls who had never scrubbed a floor, who had never known hunger, who had never been told they were worthless so many times they started to believe it. "Look at me when I speak to you," Dilara commanded. Seren raised her head slowly. Her eyes, a pale amber that sometimes caught the light strangely, met Dilara's emerald gaze. Something flickered in Dilara's expression. Annoyance? Unease? It vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Goddess, you're unsettling," Dilara muttered. "Those dead little eyes of yours. No wonder you never shifted. There's nothing alive inside you to awaken." She turned to her friends. "Can you imagine? 21 years old and still wolfless. My wolf came at 13. 13. This creature is an embarrassment to the pack." "Should have been drowned at birth," one of her companions offered. "That's what the elders wanted," Dilara said casually. "Did you know that, floor rat? When your mother died pushing you out and your father disappeared, the council voted to dispose of you. It was Alphavex's father who insisted you be kept, as a charity case. A reminder of his mercy." She leaned down, her perfume, rose, and something darker, flooding Seren's senses. "But his son isn't as sentimental. When I'm Luna, I'll finally correct that old mistake." She straightened, smoothing her dress. "Clean faster. The Alpha is announcing the trial details at noon, and I won't have your stench lingering in the hall when the candidates gather." Dilara clicked her fingers. "Oh, and I'll need my ceremonial gown pressed. Fetch it from my chambers. If there's a single wrinkle, I'll have you whipped in." The courtyard. She swept away, her entourage following. Seren remained on her knees, brush in hand. Her fingers were trembling, not from cold, not from fear. Something hot was building beneath her sternum. A pressure. A pulse. "Breathe," she told herself. "You are invisible. You are nothing. Nothing cannot be harmed because nothing cannot be seen." She repeated the mantra that had kept her alive for 21 years, but deep in the hollow of her chest, something stirred. Something that had been sleeping for a very, very long time, and it was getting harder to keep it quiet. Seren pressed Dilara's ceremonial gown with hands that still trembled slightly. The fabric was exquisite. Deep crimson silk embroidered with gold thread, depicting wolves running beneath a full moon. It probably cost more than Seren would earn in 10 lifetimes of servitude. She worked in the laundry room alone, steam rising from the iron, the heat almost unbearable. But she welcomed it. The warmth soothed the strange burning sensation in her chest that had been growing stronger over the past few months. It had started as a flicker, a warmth behind her ribs when she was frightened or angry. Now it was a constant ember, sometimes flaring into what felt like an inferno when her emotions peaked. She had never told anyone. Who would she tell? The pack physician would report her as defective. The elders would see her as a threat, and Dilara would use any excuse to have her disposed of. Besides, Seren reminded herself, it's probably nothing. Wishful thinking. A wolf-less Omega doesn't develop powers. That's not how the goddess works. But sometimes, late at night in her closet beneath the stairs, Seren allowed herself to dream. She dreamed of shifting under a blood-red moon, her wolf form massive and magnificent. She dreamed of standing before the pack, no longer invisible, no longer silent. She dreamed of a mate, not the cruel Alpha Kalen, but someone who would see her, truly see her, and find her worthy. Foolish dreams, dangerous dreams. She set down the iron and held up the gown, inspecting it for wrinkles. Perfect. Through the laundry room's small window, she could see the outdoor arena where the Luna trials were held. Workers were setting up the viewing platforms, draping banners in Ironvale's colors, black and silver. The trial would begin in a few hours. Seren's chest tightened. She shouldn't care. The trials were for candidates. Powerful, beautiful, wolfen females who had trained their whole lives for this moment, not for wolfless servants who couldn't even enter the arena without an invitation. And yet, what if? The thought crept in before she could stop it. What if somehow, impossibly, I could prove myself? What if the wolf inside me isn't dead, just waiting? She crushed the thought immediately. Hope was a luxury she couldn't afford. But as she carried Delara's gown toward the main house, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Something that would shatter everything she thought she knew about herself. The ember in her chest pulsed once, hot and urgent, almost like a warning. The noon sun blazed over the Iron Vale arena as the entire pack gathered to witness the 15th Luna trial. Seren stood at the back of the servants' section, half hidden behind a stone pillar. She had no right to watch. Delara had explicitly ordered her to remain in the kitchens, but something had pulled her here, an instinct she couldn't name. Alpha Kalen Vex sat upon the elevated platform at the arena's north end, his throne carved from black iron. He was devastatingly handsome in the cruel way that predators often are. Sharp cheekbones, ink-black hair swept back from a face that rarely smiled, and eyes the color of a winter storm. At 26, he was the youngest alpha in Iron Vale's history, and the most ruthless. Beside him sat the Council of Elders, 5 wolves who governed pack law. And standing before them, radiant in her crimson gown, was Delara Ashworth. "The trial is simple," Elder Voss announced, his voice carrying across the silent arena. "The Luna of Iron Vale must possess strength, cunning, and an unbreakable will. The candidate must retrieve the moonstone shard from the heart of the crucible." He gestured to the massive stone labyrinth that dominated the arena floor. "While facing whatever challenges await within. No weapons, no assistance. Fail, and you are disqualified permanently." 14 candidates had entered that labyrinth. 14 had emerged broken. Some physically, some mentally. One had to be carried out unconscious. Another had refused to speak for 3 days afterward. No one knew what horrors waited inside. Delara lifted her chin, confidence radiating from every pore. "I'm ready." The iron gate groaned open. Delara strode into the darkness without hesitation. The crowd waited in tense silence. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Seren found herself gripping the stone pillar, her knuckles white. Then, a scream. It wasn't a scream of effort or exertion. It was pure, primal terror. The gate burst open and Delara came stumbling out, her crimson gown torn, her perfect hair wild around her face. She was sobbing, clawing at her own arms as if trying to remove invisible insects. "Get them off! Get them off me!" 2 guards rushed forward to restrain her. She thrashed violently, her eyes rolled back, foam flecking her lips. "She's broken," someone whispered in the crowd. The crucible broke her mind. Beta Gregor shoved through the crowd, his face ashen. "Delara, Delara, look at me." But Delara was gone, lost in whatever nightmare the labyrinth had shown her. Alpha Kalen rose slowly from his throne. His expression was unreadable, but his voice cut through the chaos like a blade. 15 candidates, 15 failures. He surveyed the crowd with barely concealed disgust. "Is there no female in this entire territory worthy of standing beside me?" Silence. And then, Seren didn't know why she did it. Later, she would wonder if something else had moved her body. The ember in her chest flared white hot, and before she could stop herself, she stepped out from behind the pillar. "I'll do it." The words left her mouth before she could swallow them back. Every head in the arena turned toward her. 500 wolves stared at the dirty servant girl in her gray rags, her pale amber eyes blazing with something that looked almost like fire. Alpha Kalen's storm-gray gaze locked onto hers, and the world stopped breathing. The silence lasted 3 heartbeats. Then the laughter began. It started as a ripple. A few snickers from the noble section, and swelled into a wave of mocking howls that crashed over Seren from every direction. Wolves clutched their sides, tears streaming down their faces. The servants' section had gone deathly still, their expressions a mixture of horror and pity. The wolfless runt? She can't be serious. Someone remove that creature before she embarrasses herself further. Beta Gregor, still kneeling beside his broken daughter, rose to his feet. His face had shifted from grief to volcanic rage. You, he snarled, stalking toward Seren. You dare mock this sacred tradition? You dare insult my daughter's sacrifice by suggesting you, a defective, worthless nothing, could succeed where she failed. Seren's courage wavered. What had she done? What madness had possessed her? But the ember wouldn't let her retreat. It burned hotter, pushing words up her throat. I wasn't mocking anyone. I volunteered. Beta Gregor's hand cracked across her face. The blow sent her sprawling onto the stone floor. Blood bloomed on her lip. The crowd gasped. Not in sympathy, but in scandalized delight. This was entertainment now. Gregor. Alpha Kalen's voice was calm, almost bored. Enough. The beta stepped back immediately, but his eyes promised future violence. Kalen descended from his platform, each step deliberate, predatory. The crowd parted before him like water. He stopped 3 feet from where Seren lay bleeding on the ground. Stand up. Seren forced herself to her feet, her cheek throbbing, her legs unsteady. Kalen circled her slowly, studying her as one might examine a particularly unusual insect. I know you. The orphan girl. The one who cleans the kennels. I clean the Great Hall, Alpha. The correction slipped out before she could stop it. Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement? Irritation? She has no wolf, Elder Voss called from the platform. The law clearly states that only shifted females may compete for the Luna position. This creature is ineligible. She's not even a real wolf, another elder added. She's a mistake of nature, an abomination. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Kalen raised a hand and silence fell instantly. He leaned closer to Seren, inhaling deeply. His brow furrowed slightly, confusion crossing his features for just a moment before it vanished. You smell like smoke, he murmured, too low for others to hear. Why do you smell like smoke when there's no fire? Seren's heart hammered. I work near the kitchens, Alpha. He studied her for a long moment. Then he straightened, addressing the crowd. The law states that only wolfen females may compete. His voice carried no emotion. This female has no wolf, therefore she cannot enter the trial. He turned his back on her. Remove her from the arena. She has wasted enough of our time. 2 guards seized Serene's arms roughly. Wait, she cried, struggling against their grip. Please, just give me a chance. I can do this. I know I can. Kalen paused but didn't turn around. I've spent my entire life being told I'm nothing, Seren continued, desperation cracking her voice. Every single day. But something inside me knows that I'm meant for more than scrubbing floors and being invisible. Please, if I fail, you lose nothing. But if I succeed... You won't succeed. Kalen's voice was ice. You are not a wolf. You are a burden this pack has carried for 21 years out of misplaced pity. My father's mercy was his weakness. I will not repeat his mistake. He nodded to the guards. Take her to the eastern border and leave her there. She is hereby banished from Ironvale territory. If she returns, kill her on sight. The words hit Seren like physical blows. Banished. Cast out. Left to die in the wilderness that no wolfless Omega could survive. No! She thrashed against the guards. You can't do this. I haven't done anything wrong. But the guards were already dragging her toward the arena's exit. The last thing she saw was Delara Ashworth, still trembling and broken, looking at her with something strange in her eyes. It almost looked like fear. They dumped her at the edge of the thornwood forest as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. "Good luck, Runt." One guard spat at her feet. "The winter wolves will find you by midnight. Try not to scream too loud, it only excites them." They shifted and loped back toward the pack house, leaving Seren alone in the gathering dusk. She lay in the frost-crusted dirt, her cheek still throbbing from Beta Gregor's blow, her wrists bruised from the guard's grip. The temperature was dropping rapidly. Without shelter, without her wolf's warmth, she would freeze before any predator could find her. "This is it," she thought. "This is how I die. Alone. Forgotten. Proving everyone right about what I am." Tears burned down her cheeks, freezing almost instantly against her skin. She thought of her mother, the woman she'd never known, who had died giving her life. She thought of her father, the mystery who had vanished, leaving her to the mercy of wolves who had none. She thought of every insult, every blow, and every meal stolen from her plate. Every night spent shivering in her closet. Every time she had smiled and endured and told herself that someday, somehow, things would be different. Lies. All of it. There is no someday. There is only this cold ground and the darkness coming to swallow me. The ember in her chest flickered. No. The thought rose from somewhere deep, somewhere primordial. "I refuse." The ember flared, not a flicker this time, but a roar. Heat exploded through Seren's veins like liquid fire. She screamed, arching off the ground, her fingers clawing at the frozen earth. It felt like being burned alive from the inside. Her bones cracked, her skin stretched. Something massive was unfurling within her, something that had been caged and suppressed and starved for 21 years. "Yes," the voice in her mind growled. It was female, age-old, and furious. "They tried to drown me. They tried to poison me into silence. But fire cannot be drowned. Fire cannot be tamed." Seren's scream became a howl, but not the howl of an ordinary wolf. It was the roar of an inferno given form. The transformation completed with an explosion of light that turned the twilight forest bright as noon. Birds erupted from trees for miles in every direction. Small animals fled in terror. Where Seren had lain, a wolf now stood. But this was no ordinary wolf. She was massive, taller than any alpha, her shoulders nearly 6 feet from the ground. Her fur was not gray or black or brown. It was the deep, burning gold of molten metal, with veins of crimson pulsing beneath, like lava beneath stone. Her eyes blazed like twin suns, casting actual light into the darkness. And when she exhaled, smoke curled from her nostrils. "Ember Wolf," the primordial voice whispered. "The last of the Pyrolus bloodline. They thought they exterminated us. They were wrong." Seren, the wolf, threw back her head and howled. The sound was unlike anything heard in these lands for 1,000 years. It carried heat. It carried fury. It shook snow from branches and cracked ice on distant ponds. And in the Ironvale packhouse, miles away, every wolf stopped what they were doing. Alpha Kalen Vex dropped his wineglass, his face draining of color. Because he had just felt something impossible. The mating bond. Snapping into place. With the wolf-less girl he had just banished to die. Seren stood in her wolf form, flames licking between her golden fur, her mind reeling from the transformation. The voice, her wolf, was a presence she had never known, yet felt as familiar as her own heartbeat. "We must move," the wolf urged. He felt the bond. "They will come." Before Seren could respond, a sound reached her heightened ears. Footsteps. Not the clumsy crashing of Ironvale guards, but deliberate, measured strides. A figure emerged from the tree line. He was tall, impossibly tall, with silver-white hair that fell past his shoulders and eyes the color of a glacier. He wore a long black coat over what appeared to be tactical leather armor. Scars traced pale lines across his jaw and disappeared beneath his collar. He stopped 20 feet away, showing no fear of the massive flaming wolf before him. Pyralis, he said, softly, and the word carried reverence. After 800 years, your fire burns again. Seren growled, uncertain. Who is this? I don't know, her wolf admitted. But he does not smell of Ironvale. He smells of ice, mountains, something timeless. The man raised his hands slowly, showing empty palms. I am not your enemy, young one. My name is Kale Voren, Alpha of the Frostfang Dominion. I have been searching for you for a very long time. Frostfang. Even Seren, isolated as she had been, knew that name. The Frostfang Dominion was a legendary territory far to the north, a kingdom of wolves so powerful they answered to no council, no elder law. Their alpha was said to be older than any living wolf, a being of myth, more than flesh. You can shift back, Kale continued. I carry no silver, no wolf's bane. I swear on the old blood. Slowly, uncertainly, Seren willed herself to change. The process was painful in reverse. Bones shrinking, fur retreating, flames extinguishing. She collapsed onto the frozen ground, naked and shivering, her skin still radiating heat. A heavy coat settled over her shoulders. Kale had moved without sound. Easy, he murmured, keeping a respectful distance. Your first shift takes a toll. The Pyralis transformation more than most. How? Seren's voice cracked. How do you know what I am? Because I was there when your bloodline was nearly exterminated. Kale's glacier eyes darkened with old pain. 800 years ago, the Pyralis wolves ruled the southern territories. They were fire given form, healers in peace, destroyers in war. The other packs feared them, feared what they could become if left unchecked. He crouched before her, his expression grave. So they united. 12 packs, including the ancestors of Ironvale, formed an alliance. They hunted the Pyralis to extinction, or so they believed. He reached out slowly, touching a lock of her hair, which, Seren realized with shock, was no longer pale blonde but streaked with veins of deep crimson. They missed one, a pregnant female who fled north, into my grandfather's territory. She died in childbirth, but her daughter survived. That daughter's bloodline was hidden, suppressed, passed down through generations in secret. Until you. Seren's mind spun. My mother. Was the last carrier of dormant Pyralis blood? She didn't know what she was. The suppression was complete. But when she mated with your father, the bloodline activated in you. The Ironvale elders sensed it. That's why they wanted you dead as an infant. That's why they fed you wolfsbane in your food for 21 years, keeping your wolf in a coma. The revelation hit Seren like a physical blow. They poisoned me? My whole life? They feared what you would become. Kale stood, offering his hand. And they were right to fear. You are the last Ember Wolf, Seren. Your fire can heal or destroy. You are worth more than every wolf in Ironvale combined. Seren took his hand, rising on unsteady legs. The coat was warm, but not as warm as the ember, now a roaring flame, in her chest. Why were you searching for me? Kale's expression flickered, something complicated passing behind those ageless eyes. Because a prophecy spoke of you, the Ember Wolf who would rise from ashes to unite the fractured territories, or burn them all to the ground. He paused. And because I made a promise to your grandmother, as she lay dying in my arms, that I would protect her lineage. I have waited 8 centuries to fulfill that vow. Before Seren could respond, a howl split the night air. Then another. And another. Kale's head snapped toward the sound, his nostrils flaring. Ironvale, he growled. They've tracked your transformation. The Alpha is coming. Serene's heart lurched. Kaelin, the mating bond. She could feel it now. A silver thread tugging at her chest, pulling her toward the wolf who had banished her to die. "I won't go back," she whispered. "You won't have to." Kale's eyes began to glow an icy blue. "But we need to move. Now." He whistled sharply. From the shadows, a dozen wolves materialized, massive beasts with fur white as snow and eyes like frozen stars. The Frostfang Guard. "Take her to the northern passage," Kale commanded. "I'll hold them off." "No." Seren grabbed his arm. "I'm not running anymore." Kale looked at her. Really looked. And something like respect kindled in his ageless gaze. "Then we face them together. But Seren, you should know, once Kaelin sees what you've become, he will try to claim you. The mating bond gives him legal rights under the old law." Seren's eyes blazed gold, flames flickering at her fingertips. Let him try. They didn't have to wait long. The Ironvale wolves burst through the tree line in a thunder of paws and snarls. 20, 30, 40 of them, with more emerging every second. At their head ran a massive black wolf with eyes like storm clouds, Alpha Kaelin Vex. He skidded to a halt at the edge of the clearing, his wolves fanning out behind him in attack formation. Then he shifted, rising into his human form with practiced grace. He was shirtless despite the cold, his muscled torso gleaming with sweat from the run. But his expression, that arrogant, dismissive mask Seren knew so well, had shattered completely. He was staring at her with something she had never seen directed at her before. Hunger. "Mate," he breathed. The words seemed torn from him against his will. "You're my mate." "Interesting time to notice," Seren replied coldly. "Was it before or after you banished me to die?" Kaelin flinched. Actually flinched. "I didn't know. The bond, it couldn't form until you shifted. You have to understand." "I understand perfectly." Seren stepped forward, and flames rippled across her skin. The Ironvale wolves whimpered, several taking involuntary steps backward. "I understand that for 21 years your pack poisoned me. I understand that I was starved, beaten, and treated worse than your hunting dogs. I understand that when I volunteered for your precious trial, you had me dragged out like garbage. That was before what?" Seren's voice rose and the temperature in the clearing spiked. Snow began to melt in a widening circle around her feet. "Before you realized I had value? Before you discovered I wasn't the worthless runt you'd spent your life ignoring?" Kale stepped up beside her, his presence a wall of cold that balanced her heat. "The girl asked you a question, Alpha Vex." Kaelin's eyes snapped to the Frostfang Alpha, and raw hatred flooded his features. "This doesn't concern you, Vorin. She is Ironvale property. She was born in my territory." "She was banished from your territory," Kale replied mildly. "By your own words, in front of 500 witnesses. A banished wolf belongs to no pack. She is free to choose her own allegiance." "The mating bond supersedes banishment." "Does it?" Kale's smile was winter frost. "Then perhaps you should have considered that before you threw your fated mate to the winter wolves." Kaelin's hands clenched into fists. The Ironvale wolves growled, sensing their alpha's rage, but none dared advance against the flames that wreathed Seren's body. "Seren." Kaelin's voice softened, taking on a pleading edge that sounded foreign on his tongue. "I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But we're bonded now. You can feel it, can't you? The pull between us? That's the goddess telling us we're meant to be together." Seren could feel it. The silver thread tugged at her constantly, urging her toward him, whispering promises of completion and belonging. It would be so easy to give in. To return to Ironvale as Luna, finally respected, finally powerful. But then she remembered. Dalara's heel grinding into her fingers, the taste of floor soap in her food, the countless nights crying herself to sleep in a closet that flooded when it rained, the casual cruelty of wolves who saw her as less than human, and Kalen, standing on his platform, watching it all, doing nothing. "You're right," Seren said quietly. "I can feel the bond." Hope flared in Kalen's eyes. "Which is why this is going to hurt." She closed her eyes and reached deep inside herself, to the place where the silver thread anchored to her soul. Her wolf understood what she wanted. "This will be painful," the voice warned. "Severing a mate bond is like cutting off a limb." "I know. Do it anyway." Seren grabbed the thread with her mind and burned it. Agony exploded through her body. She screamed, dropping to her knees. Across the clearing, Kalen doubled over with a howl of anguish, clutching his chest. But Seren didn't stop. She poured fire into the bond, incinerating every trace of connection between them. The silver thread blackened, crumbled, dissolved into ash. When she opened her eyes, the bond was gone. Kalen stared at her in horror. "What? What did you do?" "I rejected you." Seren rose to her feet, swaying slightly. The pain was immense, but the relief was greater. "I, Seren Vale, last of the Peralis bloodline, reject you, Kalen Vex, as my mate. I reject your pack. I reject everything you represent. You can't—" "I just did." She turned her back on him, the ultimate insult in wolf culture. "Go home, Kalen. Find another Luna candidate. I'm sure the 16th time is the charm." "This isn't over," Kalen roared. "You belong to Ironvale. The council will never recognize your bloodline. The other packs will hunt you down." "Let them try," Kale said. He placed a hand on Seren's shoulder, and where he touched, the burning subsided. Ice and fire, balanced. "The Frostfang Dominion recognizes the Peralis heir. Any pack that moves against her moves against me." He guided Seren toward the northern passage, his wolves falling into formation around them. Kalen's voice followed them through the darkness. "I will get you back, Seren. You're mine. You'll always be mine." But Seren didn't turn around. The girl who had scrubbed floors was dead. The Ember Wolf had risen, and she was just getting started. The Frostfang Citadel was carved directly into the face of a mountain, a fortress of ice and stone that had stood for 1,000 years. Seren stood on a balcony overlooking the vast northern wilderness, wrapped in furs that seemed almost unnecessary. Her internal fire kept her warm even in the bitter cold. 3 days had passed since her confrontation with Kalen. 3 days of rest, of food that wasn't scraps, of a room with an actual bed. 3 days of training with Kale, learning to control the flames that now answered her call. She could conjure fire from nothing, heal minor wounds with a touch, and, when pushed, unleash infernos that could melt stone, but it wasn't enough. The door behind her opened. Kale entered, his expression troubled. "The Council of Elders has convened," he said without preamble. "Word of your emergence has spread. They're demanding you present yourself for verification of your bloodline." "Verification?" "The Council doesn't trust prophecies. They want proof that you're truly Peralis, and proof that you're not a threat to the established order." Kale paused. "Kalen has petitioned them. He claims the mate bond was severed illegally, that you're still bound to Ironvale by birth. He wants you returned to face judgment for defying an Alpha's command." Seren's laugh was bitter. "The command to die in the wilderness?" He's reframed it. Calls it a test of worthiness that you abandoned. Kyle's jaw tightened. He's also proposed an alternative. If you complete the Luna trial, the same one every candidate failed, the Council will recognize your independence and your right to reject him. The trial that broke Dalara's mind? The same. Seren turned to face him fully. "What's inside that labyrinth? What did those women face?" Kale hesitated. "The Crucible shows you your deepest fears. It forces you to confront the parts of yourself you've hidden from the world. Most wolves can't handle what they see. They break. He stepped closer. You don't have to do this. I can protect you here. The council's reach doesn't extend to Frostfang territory. And live as a fugitive? Always hiding? Always running? Seren shook her head. I spent 21 years being invisible. I won't spend the rest of my life being hunted. Then let me fight for you. I'll challenge Kaelin directly. Alpha combat. Winner takes all. The offer hung in the air between them. Seren studied Kael's face, the ageless eyes, the scars of countless battles, the quiet intensity that never wavered. He would win. She had no doubt of that. He was older, stronger, and far more experienced than Kaelin. But that wasn't the point. If you fight for me, Seren said slowly, I'll always be the girl who needed saving, the ember wolf who couldn't stand on her own. She met his eyes steadily. I have to do this myself, Kael. I have to prove, not to them, but to myself, that I'm not the worthless Omega they created, that I was never broken, only suppressed. Something shifted in Kael's expression. Respect, certainly, but underneath it, something warmer. Something that made Seren's newly healed heart skip unexpectedly. You realize, he said quietly, that the Crucible will try to destroy you. It will show you every moment of abuse, every cruel word, every time you wished for death. It will use your pain as a weapon. Seren's hands ignited, flames dancing between her fingers. Then it will learn what happens when you use fire against fire. She extinguished the flames with a thought. Arrange the trial. I'll face their labyrinth. Kael nodded slowly. There's something else you should know. The tradition states that if a candidate completes the trial, she may claim any unmated alpha as her mate. Any alpha in any territory. His voice dropped. Including me. The implication hung between them, electric and unspoken. Seren's cheeks flushed with heat that had nothing to do with her powers. Let's see if I survive first, she managed. You'll survive. Kael's certainty was absolute. I've waited 800 years for the Pyrolus to return. I didn't wait that long to watch you fall. He turned and left, leaving Seren alone with her racing heart and the flames that danced unbidden across her skin. Tomorrow, she would face the Crucible. And she would make every wolf who ever doubted her choke on their disbelief. The council arena was neutral ground, an amphitheater built at the intersection of 5 territories, untouched by pack politics. Thousands of wolves filled the stone seats, representatives from every corner of the continent. Seren stood at the entrance to the Crucible. The labyrinth loomed before her, walls of black obsidian that seemed to absorb light, corridors that twisted into impossible darkness. At its heart, she knew, waited the moonstone shard. All she had to do was retrieve it. 15 candidates had tried. 15 had failed. Across the arena, Kaelin watched with hungry eyes. Beside him sat Delara, finally recovered but forever changed. She flinched at shadows now, whimpered at sudden sounds. A broken doll in expensive clothing. Kyle stood in the Frostfang section, his expression carved from stone. But when Seren met his eyes, she saw it. The flicker of worry he couldn't quite hide. The trial begins, Elder Voss announced. His voice carried poorly concealed disdain. Seren Vale, wolfless Omega of... Ember Wolf, Seren corrected, her voice ringing clear. Last heir of the Pyrolus bloodline, recognized by the Frostfang Dominion. Address me correctly, Elder. A murmur rippled through the crowd. No one interrupted an elder. No one. Elder Voss's face reddened, but he continued through gritted teeth. The candidate may enter the Crucible. The obsidian gates groaned open. Seren stepped into darkness. The moment she crossed the threshold, the world changed. The noise of the crowd vanished. The temperature dropped to nothing. She couldn't see her hand in front of her face. And then the visions began. Worthless. Dalara's voice echoed from every direction. Genetic dead end. Should have been drowned at birth. Beta Gregor's snarl. You are nothing. Kalen, his eyes cold as winter stone, the voices layered over each other, a cacophony of cruelty, every insult she'd ever received playing simultaneously. Seren stumbled, her hands pressed to her ears, but the sounds were inside her head. They're right, a seductive whisper suggested. You are nothing. You've always been nothing. The power is a fluke, a mistake. You don't deserve it. No. Seren forced the word through clenched teeth. She ignited her hands, and golden light pushed back the darkness, but only inches. I am not nothing. The labyrinth shifted. Suddenly she was in the servants' quarters of Iron Vale, standing over her own body. She watched herself at 8 years old, sobbing silently into a filthy pillow. At 12, stealing food from the garbage. At 16, being beaten by Dalara while a crowd laughed. This is what you are, the crucible whispered. This is all you'll ever be. A victim. A survivor. Never a victor. Seren's flames flickered. The memories were so vivid, so painful. She could feel the old hunger, the old despair, the old hopelessness crushing her chest. Give up. Lie down. Let the darkness take you. You've been fighting your whole life. Aren't you tired? She was tired. So tired. Her flames dimmed to embers. And then, in the darkness, she heard a different voice. They tried to drown me. They tried to poison me into silence. But fire cannot be drowned. Her wolf. Her powerful, furious, magnificent wolf. We are the last of the Pyralis. Our ancestors burned so bright that 12 packs united to destroy them. That is not the legacy of the worthless. That is the legacy of the powerful. Seren's eyes snapped open. I am not a victim, she said, and her voice didn't tremble. I am not defined by what they did. To me, I am defined by what I survived. She thrust her hands outward, and fire exploded from her body, not wild and uncontrolled, but focused, precise. The flames illuminated the labyrinth in brilliant gold, burning away the shadows, incinerating the visions. I survived the poison. I survived the hunger. I survived the cruelty. She began to walk, and with each step her fire grew stronger. I survived a rejection that should have killed me. I burned the bond that should have chained me. The labyrinth walls began to crack, and I will not be broken by my own memories. She reached the center of the crucible. There, on a pedestal of white stone, sat the moonstone shard, a crystal that pulsed with pale lunar energy. But between her and the shard stood one final vision. Herself. The old Seren. Gray rags, hollow eyes, hunched shoulders. You can't leave me behind, the vision whispered. I am part of you. I will always be part of you. Seren approached her past self. She knelt down, flames carefully banked. I know, she said softly. And I don't want to leave you behind. You kept us alive. You endured when endurance seemed impossible. You are not my weakness. She took the vision's hands. You are my foundation. The vision smiled. A real smile, perhaps the first genuine smile Seren had ever worn, and dissolved into golden light that flowed into Seren's chest. She stood, grasped the moonstone shard, and the labyrinth exploded. Seren emerged from the ruins of the crucible wreathed in flame, the moonstone shard raised high above her head. The silence lasted 1 heartbeat, 2. Then the crowd erupted. Wolves who had mocked her name were on their feet, howling in disbelief. The elders sat frozen, their faces slack with shock. And Kalen looked like he'd been struck by lightning. Impossible, Elder Voss stammered. The crucible has never, in 800 years, no candidate has ever. She didn't just complete the trial, Kyle said, rising from his seat, his voice carrying over the chaos. She destroyed it. He vaulted over the railing, striding toward Seren, his eyes blazing with something that looked very much like pride. The Frostfang Dominion recognizes Seren of the Peerless as a true heir of the old blood. This is a trick! Kalen shoved through the crowd, his face twisted with desperation. She's using forbidden magic. She's standing right here, Seren interrupted coolly. And I believe I have a claim to make. She turned to the Council of Elders, still clutching the Moonstone shard. By the old law, a candidate who completes the Luna trial may claim any unmated alpha as her mate. Is this not true? Elder Voss's throat worked silently. Finally, he nodded. Then I decline to claim anyone. Seren's voice rang across the arena. I am complete on my own. I don't need a mate to validate my existence. Another shocked murmur. This was unprecedented. But before the elders could respond, a new sound cut through the noise. A war horn, terrible and piercing, blasting from beyond the arena walls. Screams erupted from the outer sections. Wolves scattered as a section of the arena wall exploded inward, showering stone across the panicking crowd. Through the breach poured an army. They wore black armor emblazoned with a symbol Seren didn't recognize, a wolf skull wreathed in silver chains. Their eyes were wrong, glowing with an unnatural purple light that spoke of dark magic. The Hollow Fang, Kale growled, his body already shifting to battle stance. The cult that orchestrated the Perelis genocide, they've returned. At the army's head strode a woman in ornate black robes, her hair white as bone, her face beautiful and terrible. She raised a staff tipped with a pulsating violet crystal. The prophecy spoke true, the woman announced, her voice magically amplified. The Ember Wolf has risen, which means she must be extinguished before she fulfills her destiny. She pointed her staff at Seren. Take her, kill everyone else. The Hollow Fang surged forward. Wolves shifted frantically, trying to organize a defense, but the enemy was too fast, too coordinated. Purple lightning arced from the cultists' weapons, dropping defenders in screaming heaps. Kale shifted into his wolf form, a massive beast of white and silver that radiated cold, and leaped to meet the charge. But even he was being overwhelmed. Seren watched the carnage unfold around her. Wolves who had mocked her were dying. Wolves who had ignored her were screaming for help. And something inside her snapped. Not broke. Snapped into place. Enough. The word came from her mouth, but it wasn't just her voice. It was layered with something eternal, something divine, and something that had slept in her bloodline for 1,000 years. Her body erupted into flame, but this wasn't ordinary fire. It was white gold, blinding, so hot that the stone beneath her feet began to melt. Her eyes became miniature suns. Her hair lifted around her head like a corona of living fire. She rose into the air, power radiating from her in waves that forced every wolf in the arena to their knees. The Hollow Fang leader stared up at her, genuine fear cracking her composure for the first time. Impossible, she whispered. The full awakening requires nothing, Seren said, her voice echoing with godlike resonance. I am the last Ember Wolf. I am the flame that cannot be extinguished. And you made one critical mistake. She raised her hand toward the army below. You made me angry. The fire lasted 7 seconds. When it faded, the Hollow Fang army was gone. Not dead, but transported, hurled through a rift of flame to a distant wasteland where they could harm no one. Their leader had vanished with them, her final scream of rage echoing in the smoke-filled air. Seren descended slowly, her power banking to manageable levels. She was exhausted, drained in ways she couldn't describe, but she was alive. More importantly, everyone else was alive too. Her fire hadn't harmed a single innocent wolf. Control, precision, mercy, the marks of true power. The arena was silent except for the settling of debris. Then, one by one, the wolves began to kneel. Not from compulsion this time, from choice. First the common wolves, then the warriors, then the betas, then the alphas. Kalen stood alone, rigid with disbelief. The girl he had banished, the Omega he had rejected. She had saved every wolf in the arena, including him. Slowly, painfully, his knees bent, his head bowed, the last wolf to kneel. Kyle shifted back to human form and approached Seren. He didn't kneel. He simply stood beside her, his presence a quiet declaration of equality rather than submission. That was quite an entrance, he said mildly. Despite everything, Seren laughed. I thought the situation called for something dramatic. It did. His glacier eyes softened. What will you do now? Seren looked out at the kneeling crowd. Wolves who had ignored her, mocked her, abused her. Wolves who now looked at her with awe and fear and desperate hope. Now, she said, I make sure no Omega ever suffers what I suffered. I tear down the hierarchies that let cruelty flourish. I build something better. That will take time. Allies. Power. I have power. Seren turned to face him fully. And I think I might have an ally, if he's interested. Kale's expression didn't change, but something ignited in his ageless eyes. The Frostfang Dominion stands with the peerless, now and always. I wasn't talking about your dominion. Understanding dawned. For the first time since she'd met him, Kale smiled. A real smile that transformed his harsh features into something almost gentle. Then yes, he said softly. I'm interested. Seren smiled back. Then she turned to address the crowd, her voice carrying across the ruined arena. Tell your packs what you witnessed today. Tell them the Ember Wolf has risen. Tell them change is coming. Her eyes found Kalen's bowed head. And tell them that those who refuse to evolve will burn. She took Kale's hand and walked out of the arena, head high, flames dancing at her shoulders. The worthless Omega was gone. The queen had arrived. And every wolf in the realm would remember this day, the day they learned that the ones they mocked, the ones they dismissed, the ones they threw away, sometimes became the ones who made history kneel. If you loved this story and want more fated mates, revenge arcs, and supernatural drama, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss when we upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.